They didn't even pretend. The waitstaff at the rooftop party floated past me like I wasn't there, warm nods, tight smiles, no real eye contact. I stood near the edge, away from the tables, clutching a wrapped book that suddenly felt foolish in my hands. Dark paper, no ribbon. Understated. Like me. Jenna had always loved that book as a teenager. Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. She used to underline sentences in pencil, slip notes in the margins, read it under the covers when she couldn't sleep. But that was before her life became champagne tastings and social calendars managed by assistants. She turned toward me finally, laughing at something someone said. Her dress caught the light, all silver thread and careful tailoring. She looked right through me until I stepped closer. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, offering the gift. She took it with 2 fingers, hesitated, then peeled it open. "A book?" she said, louder than she needed to, and smiled at the crowd, like I'd given her a basket of coupons. Laughter. Just a ripple, but it stung. She didn't open it fully. Didn't see the check taped to the last page, a cashier's check for $10 million. She set the book down on a side table, next to a clutch and a flute of Prosecco, and turned back to her friends. I didn't say a word. But something deep in me, something old, something I'd kept alive for her, went still. I stayed until the cake was cut. No one noticed. There were speeches, long-winded tributes to Jenna's journey, her vision, her courage to build a life from nothing. Her husband clapped the loudest. His cufflinks caught the light, a faint monogram engraved on each one. I recognized the font. I'd once used the same style to print Jenna's name on her 5th grade science fair poster, back when I still made things by hand. I left just before the DJ started. No one stopped me. My ride home was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't silence but something worse, awareness. The driver asked if the party had been a success. I said nothing, only watched the streetlights flicker past the window. At home, I put the kettle on. I didn't want tea. I just needed the sound. Something predictable. Something mine. I didn't cry. I stared at the leftover ribbon on the counter. I'd considered tying it around the book that morning, but I'd thought better of it. Thought the gift should speak for itself, no decoration, no apology. Just substance. That was my mistake. By midnight, I was in bed, fully dressed. The gift receipt was still in my purse. I left it there. The next morning, I woke up to an email from her assistant. Polite. Thank you for attending. Attached was a link to a gallery of party photos. I clicked through them once, glossy shots of champagne toasts, candlelight, Jenna's husband lifting her into the air, all teeth and diamonds and curated bliss. I wasn't in a single frame. The book wasn't either. That week, I didn't call her. I didn't mention the check. She didn't reach out. I thought maybe she'd find it eventually, maybe during one of her decluttering weekends or when her decorator needed to stage the room for a shoot. But something told me she wouldn't. I began to remember things I hadn't let myself revisit in years. Like how, when she was 12, she used to write me notes and slip them into my coat pockets. "I love you more than the moon," one said. I'd kept it in my wallet until the ink faded. Or how she cried the first night I let her sleep over at her best friend's house, calling me at midnight, whispering, "Come get me, Mom. It doesn't smell like home here." There had been a time she trusted me with her fears. Her secrets. Her future. But somewhere along the way, I became an accessory. A backdrop. Useful, so long as I was invisible. After her father died, I thought we'd grow closer. Instead, she took comfort in reinvention. She traveled. She married quickly. She stopped asking questions about the past. Stopped visiting the house. I was never invited to stay with them, only to drop in for lunch when the schedule allowed. I didn't blame her at first. Grief pulls people apart in quiet, cruel ways. But what she did at that party wasn't grief. It was performance. And I wasn't part of the script. The next Thursday, I went to the library, the branch where I volunteer twice a week. I shelved returned books in the biography section, dusted spines, wiped fingerprints from the checkout machines. It's the kind of quiet work that no one notices, which is part of why I like it. On my break, I sat in the garden behind the building. It's a small space, 2 benches, a stone path, a patch of lavender and creeping thyme. I sat there and thought about the $10 million. I'd saved that money slowly. Quietly. It wasn't an inheritance, or a lucky stock, or a settlement. It was habit. I'd done freelance bookkeeping for small nonprofits for decades. I lived below my means. I sold the house when it became too big for one person. I invested. I didn't tell anyone. I always thought it would go to Jenna. But sitting there on the garden bench, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to say aloud. She didn't need it. Not because she was wealthy. But because she didn't value the things I did. Not time. Not memory. Not the kind of support that isn't seen or posted or praised. She wouldn't miss it. She never even opened the book. That evening, I pulled out the original copy, my copy, of The Prophet. The one with my notes in the margins, written in the small, looping script I'd used before arthritis stiffened my hands. I read it again. Slowly. Page by page. As if trying to remember something I'd forgotten. And when I reached the final page, where the check had once been taped, I let the silence in the room answer my question. What now? The next morning, I met with my attorney. Not the family one, not the one Jenna's husband recommended years ago, who sent sleek newsletters with stock photos of happy retirees on sailboats. I met with Eleanor Barnes, who still used a legal pad and signed letters in blue ink. I want to move the funds, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. Move them where? A foundation, I said. I want to create something small. Quiet. But real. For women who gave everything and ended up with nothing. She didn't flinch. I've been thinking, I added, about how many mothers like me are out there. Invisible ones. The ones who gave up careers, identities, entire lives, because love told them to. And when the children no longer need them, they disappear. Eleanor tapped her pen. Any specific direction? Yes, I said. Education. Trade schools. Childcare grants. Not flashy. Not scholarships for Ivy Leagues. Just help. The kind that gets you from one day to the next. She nodded slowly, scribbling something on her notepad. Then she looked at me and asked. What will you call it? I didn't hesitate. The Prophet Fund. Not for the book itself. But for the message that was missed, the one Jenna had forgotten. The one that said love is not ownership. And giving is not submission. I signed the papers with steady hands. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time in years. I didn't announce the foundation. There was no press release, no social media post, no framed photo of me shaking hands with a mayor or university president. I told exactly 3 people, Eleanor, the accountant who helped me structure the grant disbursements, and a woman named Marta who ran a community center downtown. That was enough. The first check went to a single mother named Elena. 39, 2 kids, recently widowed. She'd taken 3 buses to get to her part-time job cleaning medical offices at night. Her application came handwritten, with a line at the end that read, "If this isn't the right place to ask for help, I'm sorry for taking up your time." I wrote her back personally. "You're in the right place." And you are not a burden. I mailed the envelope myself. A check for $3,200 to cover her late rent and enroll her in a phlebotomy training program. She never knew my name. The second grant went to an older woman, 67, who had been caring for her disabled son since birth. She applied not for herself, but for him, asking if there was a way to fund an in-home aid for just a few hours a week so she could remember what it's like to breathe without listening for him. That one made me cry. Not out of pity, but recognition. We awarded her 12 months of care coverage. The fund grew quietly. I added more of my savings. I restructured some long-dormant investments. The accountant called it unorthodox. I called it overdue. Jenna didn't know. Until one morning, a headline found its way into her inbox. I know this because she forwarded it to me, with a question mark as the only message in the body. The headline was from a local columnist who ran human interest pieces. She laughed at a book. It held her fortune. The article wasn't cruel. If anything, it praised the subtlety. Called it a quiet revolution in wealth redistribution. It mentioned that the woman, unnamed, had donated more than $10 million across multiple states. That she had bypassed traditional charities in favor of local, individual impact. It quoted someone anonymously, someone who had received help. She saw me. And she didn't need anything back. Jenna's email came 3 hours later. Mom. Was this about the book you gave me? I didn't respond. A week passed. Then another message. I'm sorry if I seemed ungrateful. It was just surprising. Still, I said nothing. And then came the call. I let it ring out the first 3 times. The 4th time, I picked up. Hello? Her voice was tight. Fragile. Yes. I didn't know, she said quickly. About the check. Or what you were trying to do. I thought it was just a book. A weird gesture. I didn't answer. I opened it. I saw it. It's gone now, obviously. I didn't mean to. She trailed off. I let the silence stretch. I think I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me, she said. And what was that? I asked. That I hadn't really seen you. Or appreciated everything. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. That you'd stopped even trying. A long pause. I was going to tell you about the foundation, I added, but then I realized something. What? That I didn't owe you that story. She was crying then, I could tell. Not sobbing. Just that uneven breath of someone who isn't used to losing control of a conversation. I don't want this to be how we end, she said. It doesn't have to be, I said gently. But if you want a place in my life, you'll have to come without assumptions. Or expectations. Or performances. She said nothing. We don't have to be close, I continued. But if you want to try, really try, then I'm here. Still silence. I'll think about it, she said finally. Good, I replied. Take your time. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't hope either. That night, I received a donation to the fund. Small, $250. The message on the donor form read. In honor of someone who once gave me a book I wasn't ready to understand. I didn't recognize the name. Maybe it was her. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Because the thing I'd once tried to give her, meaning, legacy, dignity, was already in motion. And it was reaching people who needed it. Not all gifts need to be accepted to be valuable. Some just need to be given. I didn't hear from Jenna again for nearly 6 months after our last phone call. And after a while, I stopped waiting. There was nothing dramatic about the silence. No tension hanging in the air. Just an absence, the kind that fills itself in naturally with other things, routines, small joys, quiet mornings. Life, really. By then, the profit fund was steady. We'd helped nearly 100 women, mothers, caretakers, widows, even one former nun who had left her order after 30 years and found herself without a home or a pension. That one stayed with me. I approved every grant myself. Some were small, grocery money, heating bills, 1-month rent bridges. Others were larger, child care subsidies, certification programs, dental work. They were all personal. I didn't make announcements. I didn't advertise what we were doing. It was enough to know that someone's worst day didn't end with a locked door or another shut-off notice. That was what the money was for. Not for legacy, not even for redemption. Just relief. Real, tangible relief. Jenna still didn't know much about it. I had no reason to keep her informed. She hadn't asked. And I didn't see why I should offer. I started spending more time in the garden out back. Not because I had any great love of dirt under my nails, but because it gave me something to tend. The roses I'd planted years ago, when Russell was still alive, had gone wild. I didn't try to shape them anymore. I just let them grow where they pleased. It was strangely comforting. Then one morning, in early October, I got the envelope. Heavy paper. The kind that smelled faintly of ink and starch. My full name printed in calligraphy on the front, which meant it had been sent through a service. No personal note, no handwriting. Inside, the invitation was printed in cream with gold trim. Jenna and her husband were renewing their vows in Napa. 10 years married. Black tie affair. Adults only. RSVP by the end of the month. At the bottom, in delicate italic, your presence is the only present we need. I stood at the kitchen counter and read it twice, then laid it flat. I didn't move for a while. I didn't feel hurt, exactly. Just tired. I wondered, briefly, what she thought that invitation was meant to be: an olive branch, a peace offering, a chance for me to sit quietly at a linen-draped table and watch her life be celebrated. I didn't need to watch it. And she didn't need me there. The next morning, I logged in online and clicked decline. No message. No regrets. Just a simple, no, I will not be attending. It was the most honest answer I could give. 3 days later, she called. I let the first 2 rings pass. Then I picked up. I saw your RSVP, she said. No hello. I sent it yesterday, I said. There was a pause, the kind that usually comes before someone says something they've rehearsed. I thought you might want to be there, she said. We've been trying, haven't we? I didn't answer right away. I leaned against the kitchen counter and looked out at the overgrown rosebush, the one she helped me plant when she was 11. I remembered her small hands digging into the earth, her hair falling into her eyes, and me pushing it back with dirt-covered fingers. I think I've been trying, I said finally. But I haven't been trying to get back to where we were. I've just been trying to move forward. She exhaled, and I could hear it, that tight breath that says she didn't like the answer but wasn't ready to argue with it. I wanted to include you, she said. I know, I said. But this isn't inclusion. This is performance. An invitation to observe. Not to belong. That's not fair, she said, but not angrily. More like she was trying to understand the rules of a game she didn't realize she was playing. I'm not trying to punish you, I added. But I've spent a long time giving myself away in pieces. And I'm done doing that in places where I'm not seen fully. She was quiet then. I could hear faint sounds in the background, probably her home, the hum of an appliance, footsteps on wood. Her life going on, as it should. I don't think I deserve this, she said finally. This distance. I know I've made mistakes, but I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to lose you. I pressed my fingers to my eyes, not because I was crying, but because I suddenly felt so very old. Not weak. Not broken. Just tired in a way that lives in the bones. This isn't punishment, I said. And you didn't lose me. You just stopped checking if I was still there. I heard her breath hitch, but she didn't respond. You're allowed to want to fix things, I said. But I can't be the one who makes that easy for you. Not anymore. More silence. I thought the vow renewal might be a good step forward, she said eventually. I believe you, I said. But I also know myself. And I know what it feels like to be dressed up and seated at a table, smiling at strangers while waiting for someone to remember I'm there. I'm not putting myself back in that seat. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I know, I said. That's the part that hurts the most. She thanked me for answering the call. I thanked her for making it. Neither of us said goodbye. We just hung up. That afternoon, I took the invitation and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not to save it, just to keep it out of the trash. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but I didn't want it displayed either. It didn't mean enough for that. And it meant too much to ignore. That night, I made soup. Lentils, garlic, a few sprigs of rosemary from the garden. I ate at the small kitchen table where Russell used to read the newspaper. Afterward, I walked out onto the porch and sat on the swing with a blanket. The evening air was cool but not cold, and the crickets were loud. I watched the sky go dark and thought about the years I had spent trying to prove my value through giving, gifts, support, advice, presents. How much of myself I had spent, how little of it was ever truly received. And how good it felt now to give in another direction, toward people who didn't expect it, didn't demand it, but met it with gratitude. Not for the money. But for the recognition. Some part of me still hoped Jenna would understand. Maybe not today. Maybe not next year. But someday. But I had stopped living in the space of maybe. It was too thin a place to build a life. That night, I slept well. I always do now. Longer than I expected. Longer than I thought it would take for things to settle, though maybe they never do, not fully. But in those 5 years, the rhythm of my life changed in ways I hadn't planned for. And maybe that was the best part of it. The profit fund grew. Not fast. Not flashy. But steady, like a vine that knew where it wanted to climb. Every quarter, we approved more grants, expanded the board slightly, added one younger woman to manage outreach, a woman named Colleen who reminded me of myself at 30, only smarter and better with boundaries. We stayed small on purpose. That was always the plan. We didn't want gala events or photo ops or plaques on buildings. We wanted action, done quietly, in the background. Rent paid. Medication covered. Respite arranged. Tuition sent. That kind of thing. Sometimes I'd get letters. Not always. Not even often. But enough to remind me that the work mattered. I kept them in a box in the back of the hall closet. Every so often, I'd pull one out and reread it, usually when the world felt a little too sharp and I needed reminding that goodness still moved between strangers. One came from a woman named Clara. 62, retired nurse, caring for a grandson with severe asthma after her daughter fell into addiction. You didn't ask me for proof, she wrote. You didn't make me explain everything. You just helped. I hope you know what that meant. I did. There were moments, though, when I still thought about Jenna. Not in the old way, not with pain or longing. Just as a fact. Like weather. She existed out there, living her life. And I existed here, living mine. We weren't enemies. We weren't quite family anymore either, at least not in the way people like to imagine family should be. But we weren't nothing. I saw her once, 2 years after the vow renewal, at an event the library hosted, a small donor reception for renovations. I hadn't been involved in the planning. I only showed up because I'd promised to bake lemon squares, and I didn't want to be the one who failed the refreshments table. She arrived late. She always had. I recognized the click of her heels before I saw her face. And when I turned, there she was. Same confident posture. Same expensive tailoring. But there was a softness at the edges I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I just hadn't been looking for it. We made eye contact. She gave a small nod. I returned it. She didn't come over. Neither did I. She left before the speeches were over. That was enough. I've come to understand that not every relationship needs to be repaired in order to be resolved. Sometimes people leave you long before they say the words. And sometimes, even when they stay, the part of you that mattered to them gets quietly replaced by someone more convenient. I don't take it personally anymore. My love for Jenna, what it once was, didn't vanish. But it changed shape. It became quieter. Less demanding. Like water finding new ground to settle in. And the truth is, I didn't need her to come back. Not in the way I once believed I did. Because the life I'd built, the one I thought was temporary, the one I thought I was just filling the time with, turned out to be the real one. I had friends now. Not many, but real ones. People who didn't know me only as someone's mother or someone's widow. They knew me as myself. We played cards on Thursdays. Went to movies sometimes. Brought soup to each other when we had colds. It was simple. But it was honest. The work at the foundation kept me sharp. I still reviewed the finances, checked the ledgers, sent handwritten thank you notes to our donors. Every now and then, we'd get a letter from someone wanting to make a larger gift, usually in memory of a woman in their life who had gone unseen. We accepted those carefully. Respectfully. We never expanded beyond what we could hold. One spring afternoon, I stood at the edge of a community college auditorium, waiting for the start of an awards ceremony. The school had invited me. One of our largest donations that year had helped expand their certification programs for older adults returning to school. I didn't want to speak, but they asked if I'd say a few words. I agreed. The woman who introduced me stumbled slightly over my name, but she smiled through it. I stepped to the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Small. Humble. Folding chairs and paper programs. But their faces, that's what I remember. So many women. So many older faces. And a few younger ones too, holding hands with the people who'd raised them. I didn't say anything profound. Just told them the truth. That I believed in second beginnings. Not just second chances. And that every woman in that room had more to offer than anyone around them probably realized. They clapped. Not loud. But real. Afterward, a woman came up to me, gray hair in a tight bun, floral scarf around her shoulders. She said, "You probably don't remember me, but you helped my sister 2 years ago. Gave her just enough to get out of a bad lease and into a real home. She's stable now. Working again. I just wanted to say thank you." I thanked her, too. Then we stood there for a moment, quiet. Before she left, she said something I've thought about often. It was just a small thing, she said. But it was the only thing that came without a price. I smiled. That's what it's supposed to be. Driving home that night, I stopped by a bakery and bought a small apple tart. I didn't need it. But I felt like celebrating something. And that, more than anything, told me how far I'd come. One morning last winter, just after the new year, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, addressed in a neat script I didn't recognize at first glance. The return address was a P.O. box from another city. I almost mistook it for one of those holiday newsletters people still send, photos of grandkids, printed signatures, cheery summaries of the year. But when I opened it, I recognized the handwriting. It was Jenna's. Not rushed, not defensive. The letter was 3 pages, written on cream stationery. She began by telling me that she hadn't known how to reach out, not after so much time had passed, not after what had been said and not said. But she'd been thinking about me more lately. About her childhood. About the book. She said she'd read it again, The Prophet. All of it, slowly. She said it felt different now. Said she understood why I gave it to her, even if it had taken her far too long to see it. I didn't know how to value something that didn't announce itself, she wrote. I still struggle with that. But I think I'm learning. She told me about some things I hadn't known. About how she'd been quietly going to therapy, about how her marriage had become strained in ways she hadn't anticipated. About how she'd recently stepped down from a committee she used to chair because she realized she no longer cared about being seen, only about being useful, in a way that meant something. The final paragraph was the one I reread. I won't ask you for a relationship. I know that's not mine to request. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. Not just what you gave, or what you endured, or what you tried to protect. I see the woman who was always there. And I'm sorry I didn't look sooner. She didn't sign it, love, Jenna. Just, Jenna. That night, I didn't call her. I didn't write back, not immediately. I needed time to let the words settle. But I didn't tuck the letter away either. I left it on the kitchen table, beside my mug and the old wooden napkin holder Russell made in the first years of our marriage. I saw it every morning. And each day, it felt less like a letter from someone I'd lost, and more like a small bridge being rebuilt plank by plank. A few weeks later, I wrote her back. Not a long reply. I didn't try to match her vulnerability word for word. I just told her I'd read what she sent. That it mattered. That I'd been alright, not just surviving, but genuinely alright. And that if she ever wanted to talk, she could call me on Sunday afternoons. That was when I didn't have anything scheduled. She called 2 Sundays later. We didn't speak about the past. Not in that first call. We talked about small things, soup recipes, the neighbor's cat, a book I was reading. It was awkward in places. But it wasn't false. And that was enough. Eventually, the calls became regular. Not every week. Not scheduled. But they happened. Sometimes 10 minutes. Sometimes an hour. Occasionally she asked about my life. Once, she asked about the foundation. I read about it, she said. A friend sent me an article. I had no idea you'd built all that. I didn't explain the details. I just told her the truth. I wanted to do something that would last after me. Something that didn't need my name attached to it. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, I think that's the most remarkable thing about it. I still didn't attend family events. Not yet. She didn't push. That was part of what made the difference, the letting me be where I was, instead of dragging me back into a shape she preferred. Sometimes, I thought about what would happen when I was gone. The foundation had been structured to continue without me. The board could manage the grants. The fund was set up to be self-sustaining, with a clause in the trust that ensured no one, not even a family member, could convert it into a private estate. It would go on, quietly, the way I always wanted. And that brought me peace. One warm afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched 2 neighborhood children race bicycles down the sidewalk. Their laughter echoed all the way to the porch. I waved, and they waved back, grinning. I didn't know their names. But in that moment, they felt like part of my world. That's what aging had become to me, not a shrinking, not a fading, but a shifting. The center of my life had moved, but it hadn't disappeared. I was still here. Still useful. Still real. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted not giving Jenna the check directly. Not explaining it. Not letting her find it, see it, claim it. But I didn't. Because it was never about the money. It was about whether she could recognize the meaning when it wasn't wrapped in the language of wealth. Whether she could see that love, when offered quietly, is still love. And that silence, when it comes from dignity rather than fear, isn't weakness. It's a choice. In the end, she didn't find the check. But she found something else. And so did I. A different kind of closeness. One not built on guilt or expectation or habit, but on slow understanding. On the willingness to see someone not for who they used to be, but for who they are now. That was enough for me. It was more than enough.